Hey, happy Monday. How are you? Good morning. Happy Monday. It is November 13th. So apparently the folks over at Moody's Investor Service watched my live stream on Friday, obviously, right? Which obviously makes you smarter. And so the folks over at Moody's were watching my live stream Friday, which a lot of you watched. It was a very successful live stream. Thank you so much. Don't forget, yes, thank you. Oh, and the like button. We need more likes. Thank you. And obviously, after they listened to the first like 10 minutes of my live stream Friday, they were like, you know what? Jack is right. We need to do something. We need to say something. And I'm glad to serve as the inspiration for Moody's, whatever they need some advice. I'm here for them. And later in the day on Friday, not that I should be smiling about this because this is definitely bad news for Americans writ large. It's not a joking matter, but they downgraded the outlook, not the bond rating, but they downgraded the outlook for America's borrowing prospects from stable to negative. So as you remember Friday's live stream, there was a long discussion about our ability to borrow and how much that might cost in the future. And from a real estate perspective, and I think most of you that are watching this are in the real estate business or somehow related to that, the yield on the 10-year directly relates to the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. So those things are, this is all connected, really easy to connect the dots here. So on Friday afternoon, clearly after watching the live stream, Moody's cuts U.S. outlook to negative, citing deficits and political polarization. This is definitely the top story in real estate and in finance. Moody's investors changed the outlook from negative to stable. The rating agency affirmed its long-term issuer at AAA, but effectively what they're saying here is if you don't change things around, we will downgrade you from AAA. Now, Fitch already did that, I think, in August, and then the other third major credit rating did it in 2011. So it's only Moody's that still has the U.S. at AAA. So what they said here was in the context of higher interest rates, without effective fiscal policy measures to reduce government spending or increase revenues, Moody's expects the U.S. fiscal deficits to remain very large, significantly weakening debt affordability. And again, for those of us in real estate, that means the yield on the 10-year is going to go up. And again, from the 10-year, the 30-year mortgage rate is going to go up. So, yeah, this is a huge factor for us in the real estate industry. Continued polarization within the U.S. Congress raises the risk that successive governments will not be able to reach a consensus on the fiscal plan to slow the decline in debt affordability. In other words, we're about to enter a fiscal death spiral, effectively, is what they're saying. I don't want to start off on a sour note, and we will talk about Whoopi Goldberg in this episode and copycat lawsuits in this episode and another business model that I just came up with this morning about how real estate could be practiced in the future, all in this episode. But, this is not good news. Let's take a look at where the 10-year is this morning. It's back up at 4.64. And, I think we'll go back to 5. I think we're going to go back to 5-year interest rates. I just think, 5-year, 5 point on the Treasury and 8 on the interest rates. So let's just take a quick look at what the plan is, because this Friday we are once again expecting the government shutdown thing, right? So this will be a test for the new speaker that we have. What's his name? Mike Johnson from Louisiana. Let's check in with today, NBC, to figure out what the plan is.
Part. Unveiled Saturday, the speaker's proposal does not include any budget cuts. That's welcome news to Democrats.
No budget cuts. So that's what Moody's is saying. Like, you've got to rein in your spending.
But it also means Congress would face more deadlines for possible government shutdowns in the future. In Johnson's plan, some government agencies would be funded until January 19th. and others until February 2nd. The approach is something hardline conservatives hope would force the Senate to pass individual bills instead of those massive spending proposals.
All right, so that's at least a step in the right direction if we go for individual bills. So what Congress usually does is pass an omnibus spending bill, which basically they wrap all the pork up into one bill, and therefore you just got to vote on it. It's like a freight train. Fortunately, now it looks like they're going to go single topic by single topic. Therefore, you can vote on the measures of that particular spending or not. I love that approach. It's a much better, it's a common sense. I like that approach. That way you don't have, as I think Congressman Gates the other day said, where you're not voting for a war at the same time you're voting for agricultural subsidies, right? So I think that's a step in the right direction. Tomorrow, I should say, and we will cover this live on tomorrow's live stream, we have CPI. The CPI number comes in tomorrow. We're expecting CPI to fall a little bit, but not core CPI. Core CPI, remember, is excluding housing and excluding energy. And over the month of October, we've definitely seen, and here's your chart of crude right now trading at $77 a barrel. It was up to 90, I think, like a month ago or so. And so most likely the core is most likely the CPI, the headline number, is going to show that it's going to decline a little bit. But core, which does not include the price of energy, is probably going to be still at 4.1, 4.2, something like that. We will cover it live tomorrow on this channel, same bat channel, same bat time, for that number. And of course, that number is going to inform the Fed about where they may or may not want to go with interest rates in the future. We got some bad news from consumer spending world. We saw last week a lot of consumer debt is starting to be exhausted from credit card spending. In fact, people are cutting back on their credit card spending because they're maxed out at this point, as all of the pandemic savings have seemed to have expired or are just about to expire. This will be a very challenging Christmas for retailers. There is, fortunately, a new consumer spending tool or measurement device that is directly tracked to credit card purchases. And this is something that is being sponsored by the National Retail Federation and CNBC. And they saw a huge dip in this last month. And in future months, they're going to include geographics and demographics. Really looking forward to this. But the preliminary numbers for the consumer in October were that not looking too good. So it was down. Consumer spending was down. By the way, I love your comments. And if you want to throw in a comment, I know it's early on Monday, but if you want to throw in a comment, very happy to hear from you. We're going to get it to the copycat lawsuits in just a second, I know. But on what was it, Thursday or Friday, Whoopi Goldberg, the font of all wisdom, called out millennials. If you want a house, you can't work a 4-day week. In other words, the only reason why young people don't have a house is because they're lazy. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's true? Are millennials lazy? Are people in their 20s and 30s lazy? Is that why they don't have a house? Do they only want to work 4 days a week? That's that's inflammatory, of course. Are young people lazy? I think as an older person, you always look at the younger generation and say, we had it harder. You have it so easy, and you're not taking advantage of the opportunity that's before you. I don't know if that's true. I think there's these huge societal things that are basically attacking the family structure, and especially men. Young men are in dramatic crisis. That guy, Andrew Tate, I don't know much about him, but my overall feeling is that he was trying to reach young men to build them up. Now, I don't know if there's some scam going on there or whatever, and I don't want to get into the whole Andrew Tate thing, but he was basically trying to promote positivity about young men's future. Let's just put it that way. At least that was part of his gig. And when you go to The Hill in this story that they ran this winter time, most young men are single. Most young women are not. This was a tremendously alarming report. You might remember it. More than 60% of young men are single, nearly twice the rate of unattached young women, signaling a large breakdown in the social, romantic, and sexual life of the American male. This is not good for us real estate people, because if men and women are not getting together as much to buy single family homes, this is a massive real estate story, right? And it ends up that women are either dating other women or older men, and consequently, young men are being left to the sidelines, so to speak. And definitely a lot of that has to do with their economic prospects. So let's go back to Whoopi or whatever her name is. What's her real name in real life? Karen something. Here she is here.
Apparently, millennials and Gen Z have a much different view of the American dream than past generations. Data shows that soaring inflation, student debt, and limited room for advancement in the workplace has made them feel that milestones like affording a home, starting a family, excelling within the corporate structure are out of reach.
And yeah, how would it make you feel, all this inflation? So basically, we keep on saying this, we're spending our grandchildren's money, and finally now the grandchildren are here, right? And they're pretty darn upset about it. So it must be pretty easy for Whoopi to say this, since she has like a net worth of $60 million or something like that. And she can go on this national television show and just prove how stupid they all are. So we're going to skip the following 2 minutes and then go back to what Whoopi had to say. Here we go.
She said one kid is enough.
Yeah, well, but
one kid's enough.
Every generation comes and wants to do better than their parents did.
You stupid people, you want to do better than your parents.
Generation. But I'm sorry, if you only want to work 4 hours, it's going to be harder for you to get a house.
Oh, she didn't even say 4 days. She said 4 hours.
Oh, and don't mention 4 days.
No, I feel for everybody that feels this, but I'm sorry. We busted our behinds. We had to bust our behinds because we didn't have the option
Y'all gave
of going
us the
back.
housing crisis, though.
But listen, we had all kinds of stuff.
No, it's true. But the one thing I'd say is millennials.
All right, we can't take any more of the stupidity, but there's an amazing amount of, it's her generation that's responsible for our current economic situation, and she's blaming millennials. I think this is tremendously irresponsible of her. There's this video that's going around on Twitter Friday, Saturday, and I want to ask you, if you don't live in New York or Boston or LA, in other words, you don't live in any of the very expensive metros, how much money do you need to get by and have a modest house, a modest, lifestyle? If you're living in Casper, Wyoming, or Jackson, Tennessee, or Alpine, Texas, or Brattleboro, Vermont, how much money do you need, really, to not to be rich, but to be making ends meet? And this video from TikTok/Twitter X got a lot of views out there, and I think the affordability issue is just one of these huge things that we have to think about. And listen to what this woman says.
In today's economy, do you think a couple that brings home $100,000 is enough to support a small family of like 3 to 4 people? I asked this because I made a post yesterday about how Americans are really struggling, and it was really sad and eye-opening to me to see the amount of people who said, I make 6 figures now, yet we're still struggling. And I don't mean, is it enough to buy like luxuries? I just mean, is $100,000 enough to live comfortably without having to live paycheck to paycheck? I remember like 12 years ago, my mom told me about this couple I knew who were making like a combined salary of 110,000. And at that point in my life, 20s, I'm thinking, what a dream, what a goal it was for me to be able to say one day that my husband and I were making like 110,000. And now here I am in 2023, and I'm like, it's not the dream life anymore. Like if someone would have told me my husband and I would be making what we're making and still having to cut back on necessities, I would have been like, you have to be kidding me. Like,
so there are dozens of videos like this all over the internet where the millennials are starting to like wake up and like, holy smoke, what have you done to us? You've crushed our American dream. And this goes right back to our spending and right back to the inflationary story and right back to the mortgage story. All of these things are interconnected. And if you're out there trying to represent these buyers, these are concerns of your clients, of your buyer clients, right? Like, how do I afford this? And it all feeds back, especially now, back to two things. Number one, the Fed, which we can't fix like immediately because they're not going away immediately. And number two, which might have more control over this in the short term, is that our spending from a government point of view is way out of whack, which is not just Jack Gately saying this. Now it's Moodys saying this, right? Moodys, which obviously they listened to my live stream and then wrote up this press release on Friday. But now it's Moody saying this, which feeds into, again, all of the political pressure and the overall environment for some type of political figure on the left or the right to like kind of cheerlead all of these lawsuits and be like, yeah, we should crack down on the real estate commissions, right? Because of the affordability factor, which I've told you about. So now we have more real estate lawsuits. Inman last week tried to do a listicle, like an old BuzzFeed article listing all the lawsuits. And I was like, no, this is not working. There's so many lawsuits nowadays. We need a spreadsheet. We need a spreadsheet to list the lawsuits. You know, someone should actually, maybe I'll do it. I don't even know if I have the time to maintain it, but maybe we'll put together a Google Sheets lawsuit spreadsheet. Maybe I can just make the template and you guys can add on from there or something like that. It's crazy because there's now a lot more lawsuits. And I warned you about this last week when I talked to you about the nice company, William Revis, but they're like a sitting duck. All of your respectable real estate firms that are regional players that haven't yet been sued yet are now sitting ducks, whether it's like your local Jack Conway, which is a longtime legacy name here in Massachusetts, or Revis or Mr. Lamacchia. They're all sitting ducks for smaller lawsuits, of which there could be a lot of copycat cases. So in case you missed it, last week, we have a new lawsuit out of New York City, a new lawsuit out of South Carolina, a new lawsuit out of Illinois, which I'm pretty sure we covered on this case. There's so many lawsuits. It is like hard to keep track. Amongst the brokers getting sued in New York, which will make for a good thumbnail because I know a lot of people like him on Twitter, on YouTube, is Ryan Serhant in his company. So yeah, another New York lawsuit. This one is based upon sellers and whether the Real Estate Board of New York basically conspired to inflate commissions. You'll remember that just a short time ago, the Real Estate Board of New York made a rule as an effort to avoid getting sued. I guess it didn't work very well. So that sellers have to pay the buyer agent directly. So sellers don't pay the list agency and then the list agency pay the buyer agency. No. Instead, the seller pays the list agency their commission, and then the seller pays the buyer agency their commission. So I think Real Estate Board of New York did that in an attempt to not get sued. It didn't work. They still get sued. So there's South Carolina. There's no doubt in my mind that once these like lawyers get started, there's now going to be a race to file as many of these lawsuits as possible. So yeah, so this is coming to a neighborhood near you. Absolutely. It's just a matter of time. So as soon as the lawyers figure out who has money, like the associations, the MLS systems, and the brokerages that have money. It's all coming to you, whether you're in upstate New York or Northern California or West Texas or wherever you happen to be. It's all coming to you locally, which actually Rob Hahn said the other day. The real danger is from small ambulance chasers. Those guys aren't going after the big dogs. They want smaller targets who are far easier to greenmail. So just take, I don't want to name anybody in particular. So we'll just say Acme Agency. And they're an agency, let's just say, with 500 agents in Spokane, Washington. I'm just making up an agency. It's pretty easy to go to them as a lawyer and say, hey, listen, we're going to win. And why don't you just write us a check and be done with this? I mean, that's what greenmail is, right? It's like it's extortion through lawsuit. And so you remember here's my class action settlement. I still haven't cashed. I have until April to negotiate the instrument. Yeah. So, man, how many of you are headed out to California for the Realtor Conference? Let me just purposely make sure I mispronounce it. Realtor Conference, not me. I will not be there. Imagine if I showed up. I don't think I'd be welcome. So the last thing I want to mention to you today is I just want to throw out this alternative business model. Let's say that you're not working on commission at all. So last week I rolled out an idea for you where you don't leave your desk. You don't go show houses. The buyers find the houses on their own. And all you do is help them write up the offer, and you work for a small commission, let's just say $2,000 per transaction. And you could do that statewide, so you're getting a smaller piece of a much bigger pie. And you could have an whole office of agents doing that, and you're helping them buy, you're giving them advice, blah, blah, blah. And you're paid on the performance of the transaction. If the transaction doesn't close, you don't make your $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever it is. That's an interesting business model. And you would need to be licensed for that, of course, because whenever for a fee for another, you need to be licensed. What about a different model altogether? What if it's and this has more arbitrage to it, and I'm interested in your comments, this has more arbitrage to it, where there's no commission involved, but it's a subscription service that's advisory. This would be kind of like the same thing as a writer for the New York Times. He gets paid, let's just say, $175,000 to write for the New York Times, let's just say. But if one of his editors doesn't like what he writes, he can get fired, and now he's getting paid $0. So he moves over to Substack, and he develops an audience over there, and he charges $8 a month. And he gets hundreds of people to send him $8. And if one person doesn't like what he writes, then he loses $8. No big deal. So there's more arbitrage to that. And what if you had a subscription service for your real estate advice, which was not dependent upon closings? So you charge X amount a month for maybe just like a minimum number of months so that nobody hires you for just like 1 month. And there's some metrics that are, or deliverables that are attached to that with a certain number of phone calls or email availability or something like that. And so people understand whether or not they're paying the right price or listing their house for the right price, or you help them advise what to write in the offer, or you help them advise to accept what offer they want to accept. There's a lot of ways you could go with that. And at, whatever the price is per month, you could arbitrage this out to be a very healthy income without ever leaving your office. Right? Oh, sorry about that. Trying to run a business here. So something to think about. You got to start thinking about these creative business models, because now with all these lawsuits and the soon to become spreadsheet necessary copycat lawsuits, you got to start thinking out of the box and think differently, right? Good old Steve Jobs, he had that idea from the IBM thing. The IBM was always think, right? I don't know if you know this, but the whole logo for IBM was think, Mr. Watson. And he came around and changed it a little bit. Think different, right? I want you to start thinking different business models so that you can be successful in the future. All right, I'm Jack Gately from Jack Gately Real Estate and the Online Real Estate Academy. Have a great day. Go make some money. Bye-bye.